he established hundreds of these. I mean, you have to realize DeSoto wandered around the entire southeastern United States for over 3 years, 4,000 miles, established hundreds of these encampments. Not a one has ever been found.
Wow.
Until now.
Welcome to Being the Change, the official podcast of James Madison University. Brought to you by Madison Magazine. Each episode brings you stories of how members of the JMU community combine intellect with action to live lives of purpose and meaning. That's being the change.
What's up, JMU? Andy Perrine here. Welcome to Being the Change. In this episode, we're going to be talking about discovery. Discovery from an anthropological, archaeological sense. And with us are some very special guests. Dr. Dennis Blanton, who's a JMU professor of anthropology. Dennis, welcome. Glad you're with us.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Andy.
And Kyle Mitchell. Kyle is a 24 alum, and he was one of Dennis's sidekicks as an undergraduate and went to field school with him. And one of the great things that we'll hear about is not only is Dr. Blanton making significant discoveries in terms of anthropology and archaeology, but he's doing it with undergrads by his side. Like Kyle. Welcome, Kyle.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Glad you're here. Also with us is JMU alumna from class of 2022, Grace Gordon. She's joining us remotely. Grace, welcome.
Hi, happy to be here.
Thanks for being with us. All right, so now the significant discovery that Dr. Blanton had been on for a better part of his career and had got a taste for growing up in the South was a very significant discovery connected to Hernando de Soto. And he's a very important historical figure. And I'm going to let Dr. Blanton tell you who he was, and then we'll get to what has been found.
At the time that Christopher Columbus discovered, we'll say, this hemisphere we call the Americas, it unleashed a wave, really a tsunami of people.
Mm-hmm.
And
coming from Europe.
Coming from Europe. And at the vanguard of that were what I'd refer to as disruptors. And many people know them as conquistadors. Right. And if there was a who's who list of disruptors at the forefront of that change, really a major change in the world, Hernando de Soto would be on it. And de Soto is best known for his participation in the Pizarro expedition, the conquest of the Inca down in Peru and the Andes. But later he led his own expedition into the southeastern United States. And he was the very first European to explore deeply into that area.
And this is roughly 500 years ago.
500 years ago,
right.
Between 1539 and 1542.
Right. And so you got a taste for who he was because it was kind of a point of pride down in Florida and some regions of Georgia to have some connection to the idea that the conquistador de Soto came through here.
That's exactly right. When I grew up, you drive around and there were towns and then historical markers that people celebrated because it said De Soto slept here.
Right.
We now know that most of those things are wrong. And so that's become my mission, really, is to try to bring some accuracy to that story.
Well, and you came to this property in Georgia that we'll get into talking about basically through a phone call because you were a known expert about finding these kind of artifacts down in that neck of the woods. So tell us how you came to this.
I was working at a museum in Atlanta. I was a curator there of archaeology, and we get lots of calls from people who have artifacts. And this one, though, came from a gentleman named Doug Ivester. He's the former CEO of Coca-Cola. He owns an enormous property in southwestern Georgia.
We're talking tens of thousands of acres.
25,000 acres, which is unimaginable. And he had an employee at the time who was finding many, many artifacts, and he became a little bit concerned maybe these are important and maybe they're even valuable. So he wanted somebody to appraise, right?
And most of it was native, indigenous.
They were Native American things. The average person would call an arrowhead.
Right.
And so I was invited to come down and help him make sense of what these things were. Well, I also knew that property lay exactly in the suspected path of DeSoto.
Mm.
No one had ever found any tangible evidence of DeSoto's passage through there, but that was sort of a consensus location. And so when I went down, I was not the least bit interested in those arrowheads.
Right.
But I was very interested in the possibility of DeSoto. And Doug Ivester loves to tell the story that I walked in and sort of sniffed at these things and offended everybody and asked if they had any DeSoto stuff. And they said no. And I started to walk away. He said, wait a minute. But I did ask a specific question, is that, do you have any Native American pottery?
Mm-hmm.
And this young fellow said, well, I think so. And he went out to the barn, literally, and brought in a 5-gallon bucket full of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I took one look at it and knew immediately that that pottery came from Native American villages that were in existence at the time DeSoto came through. So that became the first potential link.
Interesting. And because, I mean, DeSoto was traveling with like 600 men and 200 horses, and it would have been a very large group of people passing through.
It was a small army, and it functioned like a small army.
Right.
It was 600 people, between 200 and 300 horses, and we think intuitively, right, that they would leave this trail.
Right.
In fact, maybe a massive trail.
Right.
But we now know that it's not so massive, and so trying to find evidence, hard evidence of DeSoto and this small army is very, very difficult. I mean, it is the proverbial needle in a haystack. Mm-hmm. And so the Ivesters invited me to work on the plantation here. I was excited to do it. But from the time we started until the time we found the first artifact that we could link to that expedition was 6 years.
Mm. Well, then fast forward, you wind up coming to JMU, and you still have this passion for finding DeSoto in your research, and you come to know the wonderful kind of undergraduates we have here at JMU, and you wanted to take them back in your continued search. So how did you involve students?
Students have meant everything to this project, and that's true and sincere. Part of my job here at JMU is to lead a field school. And we have a course here called Anthropology 494. It's Field Techniques in Archaeology, and it's an essential course for anyone aspiring to be an archaeologist. It becomes a critical credential for finding employment. And so a number of our students had joined the field school, and when we organize it and we go down to Georgia, I explained to the students before we even leave this, I'm going to treat you not like a student. I'm going to treat you as a colleague, as a team member on this research project.
Well, Grace, I'm interested. What's it like to be part of the field school with Dr. Blanton? I mean, an undergraduate digging around in Georgia. What was that like?
It was a really exciting experience. It was my first experience actually doing hands-on archaeology. I was introduced to archaeology through Dr. Blanton's historical archaeology course, and unfortunately that was during COVID. And so that whole course was featured or centered around Montpelier, but we didn't actually get to do any digging there. It was mostly just research and looking at previous digs that had been done. And then I never actually got to visit Montpelier during the class because it was COVID. So
and
I enjoyed that class.
Our listeners will remember that Montpelier is the home of James and Dolly Madison.
Yes, exactly.
And we've had field schools there for many years.
Yes. So I enjoyed that class so much, and just learning about archaeology and what it can teach us about the past. And was just talking with Dr. Blanton, and he recommended I look into his field school, and I did. It was that summer. So it was very exciting to actually get to do hands-on archaeology after just having learned about it one semester earlier. And for this to be the place where I learned it, all the basics, was very exciting because it was a really cool dig to be a part of.
The idea is, there's kind of a saying we use, there's no I in archaeology. It's a team.
Mhm.
It's a team effort. And the students were all about it. I mean, they were fully invested in this search for evidence of this historically significant event.
Mhm.
Many of them made the very first discoveries of Spanish artifacts.
Mhm.
No question about it. And in fact, Grace was undertaking an excavation in one of these Native American houses that we found. And she and another student were excavating there, and they called me over and they said, well, we have something peculiar here. We want you to look at it. It was sort of jutting out of the side of the excavation. And I was distracted, and I walked over and I said, oh, well, that's great, but it's just a piece of pottery.
Mhm.
And I walked away, and they summoned me back over. And they said, I think you need to look again. And sure enough, what it turned out to be was the very first iron artifact that we had discovered. And so that was one of those sort of touchdown moments that lit a fire and had us coming back, for several more years.
So Grace, I mean, you made a significant discovery down in Georgia back in 2021. What was it like when you made that discovery? I mean, were you grinning ear to ear like Dr. Blanton's describing?
It was definitely very exciting. I would say my first reaction was probably confusion because I didn't know what I was looking at first. I'm not as versed, obviously, as in this whole world as Dr. Blanton is. In the unit I had been digging, and most of the units we've been digging, we'd really only been finding lithics and stone tools related artifacts in pottery. I'm sure it's a part pottery. And I noticed in the sidewall of the unit that I had this object sticking out that didn't have any curve to it at all, which all the pottery shards had some curve to them. And so I just didn't really know what it was. And then we kind of left it in the sidewall and asked Dr. B to come over and take a look at it. And based on just the width and the size, he was like, I don't think that's pottery. I think that's actually iron. And it turned out to be a cell, which was extremely exciting because, that's what we were looking for. The conquistadors in contact with the Native Americans. And it was right there in the sidewall in position, which was really cool to find.
Oh, that's amazing. Unforgettable, right? Is this the kind of excitement that you are after when you're out in the field, Kyle?
Oh yeah, it's great when you find that artifact that maybe hadn't been found on the site yet, or it's just a big one, and it feels really, really good. You're the first person in however many hundreds of years to hear that.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And I bet it's like electric among everybody who's there.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, let's back up a little bit again, Dennis. And one of the interesting things that I think our listeners will find fascinating is the interaction between DeSoto's people and the indigenous people. And that link of those two different people sort of led you to making some assumptions about where you might find DeSoto's biggest encampment.
That's right. We worked at this property for a long time, and on a neighboring property, I'd heard a rumor of these features on the landscape that I'd often describe as earthen bird nests, like giant, like a pterodactyl nest. I don't know what a pterodactyl nest looked like, but they should have looked like this.
Probably big.
Yeah.
Right.
And so there are these earthen rings, that are raised above the common level of the ground, and what we know is that they're Native American houses that have collapsed. And I went and mapped these things at this property and did a little bit of work, determined that they might be related to DeSoto. And the fellow who owned that property said, well, I think there's some in the area that you've been looking. And he gave me an approximate location, and I went over there and spent a couple of days by myself,
Hacking around with a machete.
literally thrashing around in the swamp trying to find these things. And sure enough, I found one of these rings, and then I found one and another and another and another. And it was one of those occasions where all of a sudden you have this crystal clarity about where you're standing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was instantly obvious that we were in the middle of this Native American village.
Mm.
And I also sometimes describe it as it's walking into a Native American ghost town.
Mm.
And so that was neat enough. But we went back the next year with the field school, and I told the students, as we're going to try and understand what these donuts really are about.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started to excavate one of them, and it became clear that they were DeSoto period. Then the next year, Grace and another student found that iron artifact in there, and all of these threads started to come together, because I recalled that the DeSoto participants in their writings said that, you know what, when we get to this Native American territory called Capachecchi, which coincides with this location we were working, the Indian houses changed.
Mm.
They're very different all of a sudden from what we were seeing farther south in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Florida, they were lightly built, sort of open air things more so.
Because the climate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when we get to Capachecchi, they described them as like caves under the ground.
Mm.
And so that's what we were seeing.
Mm.
That's what we're excavating. And that's where we're finding these artifacts, is in the caves under the ground that were described by the Spanish in the spring of 1540.
Mm.
So it was an instant connection between the documents we have for DeSoto and the archaeological record.
So this shows that you were onto something.
We were onto it big time.
Yeah, and this is on the Deer Run plantation.
This was on the Deer Run plantation.
Well, and now, so that folks understand, the interactions between the Spanish and the indigenous folks were sometimes peaceful and sometimes not.
Oh, no question. It varied quite a bit. I would say more often than not, there was a great deal of tension.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the case at Capachecchi.
Mm-hmm.
The Spanish had spent the winter in what's now Tallahassee.
Mm-hmm.
And they were effectively under siege for months and months. And they developed a nasty reputation. And Capachecchi was close enough to that location that I'm sure that reputation preceded them when they arrived. And so the reception they got at Capachecchi was not exactly friendly.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that, for example, 5 of the Spanish who broke apart temporarily from the larger group were ambushed. A couple of them were died. Others were badly wounded. And so there's no doubt that there's not only conflict we see in the historical record, but what sort of thing we anticipated to see in the archaeological artifacts as well.
Well, in particular, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the artifacts were chains.
One of the most common artifacts that we have, in fact, on these sites is iron chains, usually in links of chain. Occasionally we'll find a few still attached, but most people would think, what in the world would an expedition like this be doing with hundreds, maybe thousands of pounds of chain?
Mm-hmm.
These are men on foot,
Mm-hmm.
and even on horseback. That's an enormous load to be carrying. Well, the fact of the matter is, these chains were used to bind Indians together, Indian captives. And so the Indians were shackled and forced to bear burdens and conduct other kinds of, we'll call it services, for the Spanish. And so when DeSoto left this winter encampment near Tallahassee, they say specifically that we had many, many, many Indians in chains. And so we're finding what amounts to the very first slave chains in North America on these sites that reflect that aspect of the expedition.
Well, and for our listeners, there's an interesting sort of difference between archaeology and anthropology. And so in archaeology, you're basically uncovering things, and then you're interpreting it as an anthropologist. So what's happening is you're assembling a story of the early history of North America as an anthropologist.
We are, and I think what people I hope will appreciate is that it's not about finding things as the objective. The finding of these things, these artifacts, is important, but it's a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. And my goal through these artifacts, whether it's broken chains or fragments of weapons or even the Indian houses, is trying to understand this opening chapter in modern world history. There's no question that defined what the world is like today. I mean, today we use terms like globalization and networking and so forth that all started at this time. This is where we trace it back to. So if we want to comprehend the legacy of these giant changes in the complexion of the world, we've got to understand these events, including expeditions like Hernando de Soto.
Yeah. Well, this fall, you made something of a major discovery, and Kyle was there with you. Kyle is an alum, but he loves his time with Dr. Blanton so much he came back and joined you in Georgia in October for what was kind of a major operation. How did all of it come together?
Well, Kyle has been in touch, and students do, and I love it when students, stay in touch and let me know what they're up to. For me, that's the greatest interest, to know they're out there doing good things.
Well, I have to mention that one of the reasons why we got onto this story was an alumnus who was one of your students sent an email to Being the Change at jmu.edu saying, you ought to interview Dr. Blanton. He's so much fun to be with. So there's evidence to this fact.
And Kyle is one of those students who's been in touch, and he's always said, is that if you ever are back in the fields and there's an opportunity for me to participate, I would love to try and join. And so this was an occasion where he could get free of his work, and he came down and spent the week with us and did some very important work alongside helping us map these finds.
Describe for us, Kyle, what you were doing for Dr. Blanton and the operation.
Yeah, so my primary job while I was down there was laying out a grid of everywhere that they were surveying and finding artifacts, and then I plotted everything they found, whether it ended up being completely related or not, on that grid. And after they moved through a couple areas, I went back through and plotted it all on GPS. So it was really just a lot of mapping of where everything was being found. And then I also got to participate in some of the metal detecting. That was the primary survey method they were using. So I got to do that a little as well.
And how important are these maps to your work, Dennis?
They're everything.
Yeah.
What happened is, let me tell you, this area of scholarship is hotly contested. A day in my life is a day of fear. My peers are the toughest jury that there is. And so
you better get it right.
You better get it right. And if I make a claim, I have to back it up. And I have to back it up with very well collected information. And so we often describe what we do as likened to detective work. And these artifacts and all the documentation that go with it become Exhibit A.
To support your claim.
To support the claim. And there's no jury that would accept my claim unless I have the smoking guns, right, as it were, to support it. And so what Kyle's doing, And there's no overstatement to say is really establishing this baseline that will be referenced not just by me, not just by my peers alive today, but for generations of archaeologists who will revisit this discovery and work it over and with fresh eyes.
And potentially reinterpret.
And reinterpret. So the starting point will be this set of data that we've collected and that Kyle helped with.
Well, and you describe it as detective work. Kyle is in law enforcement now. And so this wasn't too far from what you're doing professionally.
No, it's definitely not directly related, but somewhat.
Right. Interesting. Well, now, you made a big discovery that kind of paid off your suspicion that in this place, in Deer Run, there was, in fact, a really big encampment. Tell us what you discovered.
These archaeological sites are large, like the rest of the property, and the way I organize these expeditions is to identify a location and then put together a team of experts, really my colleagues, to come down and help. And
These
so
are the people you fear.
These are the people I fear. We tend to be pretty civil, but sometimes after dark, who knows what happened. But at any rate, my job really is that of a coordinator. And there's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts. And so every day we have a work plan. And these folks were out there doing their metal detecting, and Kyle was doing his mapping, and I was going here and there trying to keep things moving in the right direction. Well, the folks with the detectors were systematically covering the area, and I'll usually check in periodically. Well, sometimes I check in, and you can tell from their faces it's been a little bit slow. Other times I check in, and there's an ear-to-ear grin, and I can see this from like a half a mile away. And I drove up in my truck, and I looked out across that field where they had been working, and there was one of those big old grins. In fact, there was about 6 of those big old grins, and they were beckoning me to come over, and I thought, what in the world? And one of my colleagues, Aaron Elrich, he held out his hand, and in his hand was one of those artifacts that you might dream about finding, but you never would have expected to find. And what it was the pommel of a Spanish sword that dates from the 16th century. So we think about the kind of signature item that kind of closes the deal. That's it. And people say, well, you've got a bunch of stuff, right? Well, yes, but to the average person, it's not that compelling. Pieces of chain, musket balls. People don't get too excited about that. But when you can show them this fragment of this weapon carried by a member of that expedition, then they say, now you're talking. Is exactly what it was, one of those now you're talking artifacts that helps us really build the case, because anybody would recognize it for what it was.
That's amazing. Kyle, how'd you feel about being part of an expedition that made such a significant discovery?
Yeah, it was incredible walking over when they were all checking out the pommel and just seeing it there and knowing that was going to be like the signature artifact that we found.
That's amazing. And if you're curious about what this pommel looks like, the current issue of Madison magazine, which is out, you'll find a full story about Dennis and Kyle's exploits in Georgia. So take a look, and it's also online if you want to see it. So how does the pommel, which is a piece of a sword, kind of the counterbalance, how does it signify to you that, wow, there was a large encampment here?
Well, alone, it's not sufficient to establish encampment, but together with everything else.
Got it.
So we say, in the aggregate, right, we've got a great number. In fact, I'll say an unusually not large number of artifacts with unusual variety, which would be a basis perhaps to make the case for the encampment. But the pommel puts the exclamation point on
Got it.
The pommel puts the exclamation point on it. And to sort of close our circle of conversation, the pommel was discovered at one of these donuts
Okay.
on the site. And I'm thinking at this point that Indian house had been taken over by the Spanish and became their temporary residence while they were there, which was part of their modus operandi.
And there might have been a fight, given the fact that this sword was in pieces.
Well, I still am scratching my head about how that sword came apart.
Right.
And the best explanation was that there was, that particular weapon was, involved in a fight. Maybe the one on the site. Maybe that clash between this group of Indians and that small group of Spaniards, because we know that it was hand-to-hand combat. The Spanish came out of the short end of that stick. And in fact, we know, just to sort of add a little drama to it, the Spanish were so badly beaten, the Indians took the shields away from the Spaniards and used it to pound the Spanish soldiers.
Oh, my goodness.
So, getting wailed on by your own shields is potentially enough force to damage a sword or something of that nature.
Well, and also signify that you're losing badly.
You are losing badly. And so the other interesting thing is that the significance of this encampment is that it was 6 days. 6 days.
And you know this by some of the diaries and records?
Some of the diaries, that's correct. And this was the most common kind of encampment that DeSoto set up, say from 2 to 6 or maybe 10 days. We call them these sort of short-term encampments. He established hundreds of these. I mean, you have to realize DeSoto wandered around the entire southeastern United States for over 3 years, 4,000 miles, established hundreds of these encampments. Not a one has ever been found.
Wow.
Until now.
That's amazing.
Not a one has ever been found. And so that's what's exciting about it. We did not know what one of these things would actually look like. And now we're putting together the picture. This is sort of the fact pattern that other archaeologists of the future will be able to use. It will become the reference point for other people trying to find the same kind of encampment. So we hope that it inspires, research in other places sort of down the line on DeSoto's route.
Well, Kyle, as a young guy, being part of that discovery, it's got to mean a lot to you in your experience.
Oh, yeah, it was incredible. I've done some field work. I did my field school and then a couple small, just like weekend projects with Dr. Bland. But it was incredible to be there for a week and see these discoveries happen.
That's amazing.
For me, it's so gratifying to see the students develop to the point where they do become a peer. And that was the role that Kyle was able to play. And it was really wonderful to see, over the course of the week that we were down there, he had responsibilities and he took off. I mean, he ran with it. And so within, I would say, 2 days, people were asking more questions of Kyle than they were of me. I mean, it really, he functions at a very high level, is very competent, and so he gained the respect of everybody on the team. And that's what we want. We want to develop, in our students, people who can go out there and work independently and effectively and be a part of the big picture.
As someone who's devoted his life to education, is there anything more gratifying than that?
There is not.
Well, I'm really so excited that you're both here. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. Dr. Dennis Blanton and Kyle, I'm so happy you came back to campus, not only to talk to us on the podcast, but to go to a football game.
Oh, yeah.
Good man. And remember, listeners, if you've gotten any ideas for other episodes of Being the Change, you can reach us at beingthechange@jmu.edu. Until next time, go Dukes.
Thanks for listening. Subscribe to hear more stories about how members of the JMU community are being the change. Dive deeper and explore countless other stories at jmu.edu/Madison Magazine. Go Dukes!
The Being the Change podcast was conceived by Jim Heffernan, editor of Madison Magazine, and me, Andy Perrine, head of JMU Marketing. Thanks to Jenna Polk and her team at the Rose Library Studios, where the show is recorded by Cody Troyer, Steve Adderton, and Olive Santos, all of the crazy talented JMU photo video team, who then produced the final episodes at the Ice House in downtown Harrisonburg. Original music by 2019 alumnus Neil Perrine. You can find the Being the Change podcast on all the popular platforms where we hope you'll like, share, and subscribe.